My name is Philip Theodore, commonly known as T, Philip T. I was born in Cincinnati at the old Bethesda Hospital in Avondale. And my family were living in Middletown. My mother had to bring me down to come down here to have her baby. Anyway, I graduated from Middletown High School in 1937, and I came to Cincinnati, to the University of Cincinnati, and went through the mechanical engineering program, graduating in April of '42. During my years at the university, I joined the Sigma Alpha Mu fraternity and was a member there. And Rabbi Reichert was one of the founders of the fraternity, I guess in New York, where he grew up. And he would invite us to services. So I did use the facilities here during the years I was in school on a number of occasions. I got married in 1948. My wife was a lifelong member here. And when we got married, Rabbi Reichert said to me, to both of us really, that he'd like to see us get active in the congregation. And so we became a part of a group of young married couples that came to services almost every Friday night. And we would either go to someone's house after services, or we would, in the old Phillipson Hall, we would have social together. And that went on. I joined the congregation when we were married in '48. I went on the board of Rockdale Temple in the 1956. Went on the board and became active right from the beginning, and I still am. And then a second vice president, and the first vice president, and I became the president in 1965. And I was the president from 1965 to 1967, and I was involved in the campaign to raise the money for this facility. And I was a co-chairman of the building committee with Charles Messer, and he had become ill shortly after that, and so that I was left with the big responsibility for the construction supervision. And so I've been interested and active in the temple over all these years. Years have gone by, my children were born, and two daughters and a son. They were raised here in the temple. I've been involved in just about everything that went on here at Rockdale Temple over the years. And when the population of the congregation started to drop, we moved here with almost 1,000 members. And today, I guess it's a little over 400. And I became concerned about the future of the congregation. And as a member of the Jewish Foundation of Cincinnati, they were looking for a site for the Jewish Center. And the thought came to me that maybe we could resolve two things in the community at the same time by selling the temple grounds and facilities to the foundation for the use of the Jewish Center and retain the temple here. And it's obviously worked out very well for everybody. We had a beautiful building on Rockdale Avenue in Avondale. And when the riots took place in Cincinnati, three of us in the leadership.
What year?
It was 1967, spring of '67. The building really hadn't been damaged, but the stones had been thrown at cars and people leaving the temple on a Friday night of confirmation, of the beginning of confirmation. And Henry Hirsch, who had replaced me as president of the temple in January, and Dick Weiland, who was a member with a lot of connections to the black community, a lot of volunteer work that he had been doing. The two of them and I met with the leader of the man named Bailey Turner, and we met at his house and we talked him into protecting the temple for the year and a half that we were going to need until we completed this building. And we offered them the use of the Phillipson Hall, the social hall, and we invited them to attend services, and he agreed to it. And for a year and a half, nobody touched the temple, not one person. And when the move took place, the day after we pulled out of there, the place was destroyed.
Wow.
Probably some 10 or 12 years later, our doorbell at our home in Avondale rang, and I went to the door, and it was just Bailey Turner. He was soliciting for some community affair, and the minute he saw me, we renewed our friendship, and it was a good friendship, and we sat and talked for an hour about what had happened over all these years. I was always interested in the good and welfare of the black community. I had a lot of black employees and in responsible positions and doing a good job. And I marched in here in Cincinnati, Martin Luther King. I marched in Columbus, a group up there, and I went to Washington when I don't know, must have been 1 million people there. Went with Rabbi Blackman, and there were others. I think we had maybe 14 or 15 people that went up. It was the night before the confirmation, when the riots took place. Part of the confirmation service was done that Friday night, and then the rest of it was to be done Saturday morning. And so after the riot took place, the rabbi went into the temple with police and got out the paraphernalia that he needed and took it all, in the Torah and all, they took it out to the Jewish Center. And they had the service out there. Now, there are some people that thought that we continued to use the center up until the time we made the move, but that wasn't true. We just used the center that one morning, and then we went right back to the temple. Well, they moved in there around 1904, was it?
1906, it was dedicated.
Well, okay, construction started probably for. Beautiful building. And we brought most of the stuff out here that we use on the high holidays. But it was a magnificent building. It was torn down. The board, I went on the board in 1956, but in 1955, the board and the congregation purchased property in Roselawn on Dawn Road with the idea of putting the congregation there. And they had made arrangements with a business down on Galbraith Road below it to trade off some property so that we could have a drive off of Galbraith Road right up into the temple. I was opposed to that, and a lot of other people were too, but they went ahead and bought that property. But fortunately for us, the state was planning the Reagan Highway. And as you come off, going north on 75 and make the turn onto Reagan, that was our property that we owned, and they bought 8 acres from us. And without that 8 acres, it was no longer a reasonable choice for us. And thankfully, a couple years later, the state bought off the rest of it. So we did okay with the property. So then we started looking for another site. And Philip Myers Sr. and Jim Heldman Sr. and I were a committee of 3 searching for the proper site. And we looked all over. We even thought about over where the Myers home was before they hadn't started the apartments. But when we talked to Phil about it, he would have liked to have it there, but he had already made a commitment to build housing. But he said we could get the backside of that property. And we looked, and he even talked about getting property from the neighbors on either side so that it would be a proper amount of area. But we decided it was not a site for a community congregation. It was okay for a neighborhood. So we gave that up. And at the time, Sholem had just built on Ridge, across the street here. And we were reluctant to build across the street. We had this offered to us. Marvin Warner, a member, owned this property, and the Myers family owned the property that Wise has got right down the street. And we had our choice of either site. And we all agreed that we preferred this site. Visibility is better. You know. So we ended up buying this, and then Wise came along. I guess it was probably 5-6 months later, and bought the other property.
Phil, what would you say is your greatest legacy to Rockdale over all these years?
In all the years, the sale of the property.
You mean the foundation, the foundation? The sale?
Well, yeah, because of the foundation. Well, because I see what's happened to the congregation, and we couldn't afford to keep this property, the whole thing. We would have had to sell and move someplace else or do something. We couldn't have stayed here. I was sure of that. But a lot of things that almost every decision that was made around here for a long time, I was part of it. Not myself. We always had a good group of people that were dedicated to and committed to the congregation. It wasn't me by myself. No. All of the past presidents that preceded me are gone. And all of the first probably half dozen or more who succeeded me are gone. So there's a big gap in there where I'm the only one around here that's still on 2 feet. It was Sally's mother and Beverly Friedman and I were co-chairman of the annual meeting, dinner and party downtown for I think it was 3 straight years. And we used to get like 700 people. Wow. The meeting part took place for about 10 minutes, and then the party started. When I was coming here when I was in college, but I don't remember whether he was still, I think when we had gotten married, he was already passed away. Louise was a great Rabbitson. One of the first things we did was create an honorary board of all the affluent members of the congregation. Without that, we couldn't have raised the money. I spoke at that honorary board meeting, and Murray Seasongood, who was, I think, 98 at the time, said, well, we got to do it. He was ready to, and he was one of the guys that pushed for them to get, and Phil Myers. And, Jimmy Salinger and I together solicited most of the big gifts. Charlie Messer did some of them. It was not easy. With the center and the temple together.
Seems to.
It's done in other communities. The Federation had a search committee looking for a site, and they'd been all over the northern part of the city. They'd been to Montgomery, they'd been out to Blue Ash area and all. That search committee ended up wanting to put the center across the road.
There's land over there.
Yeah, right behind the Amberley Village maintenance area. And the access to it is so bad. There's a little narrow alley-like size, and it's dark. They never would have got permission from all the houses along that street to have a lot of night lights and all. You have to light up the place. But the worst part of all was that there were only 2 people that knew that it was bad ground. Foundation meeting, but I said, the best place to put it would be on the grounds of Rockdale Temple. Everybody popped up, everybody says, so I guess it wasn't Gary, well, Ben Gettler was president. He said, we can't, he said, it's a great idea. He said, but we can't make that decision. It's the Federation's decision. So he said, why don't you go talk to the Federation and see what happens. And I went and saw Zedek. Rabbi Zedek was the executive. I was told to talk to him. And he was negative. He had already made up his mind we ought to be across the road there. And he just wasn't going to budge. So I came back to the foundation board and told them, they said, well, that's up to them. We won't do anything until they make a final decision. Zedek said we tried. We were going to look at it and see, and he told me that it wouldn't work. And I knew that it would because I knew how much acreage there was here, and we had to tear down some buildings, which, you know, had to go. They were beautiful buildings. The auditorium, some pretty buildings.
There's more land back there, isn't there?
Yeah, we had an outstanding group of leaders, an outstanding group. It wasn't one person, it wasn't me, it wasn't any one person that did all that was done here. We were lucky at the time when we had big decisions to make, we had the right people around. People I could go on forever and tell you.
A lot of loyalty of generations as well.
It wasn't just the few men that did everything. The women played a big role in this congregation. I'll be 96 in April.
And in 4 years, we're gonna celebrate your 100th birthday. We're gonna have a big
I don't
to-do.
I don't worry about that.